Good morning to Mr. Julian and good afternoon to my Malaysian friends, my Selangau friends. We are honored to have Mr. Julian with us today. I'm also feel honored to have all of you here. So now, before I invite Mr. Julian to share with us, I would like to invite Dr. Noel. Please, Dr. Noel.
Yes, thank you very much, Miss Stacy, our Master of Ceremony for this afternoon event. Yang dihormati, semua guru besar, semua PK, penyelaras PLC, tuan-tuan hadirat yang dihormati sekalian. Izinkan saya untuk meneruskan sesi welcoming speech ini dalam bahasa Inggeris. So I hope that hopefully Mr. Julian can understand us more. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all. I am Dr. Noel, and I'm extremely overwhelmed to get this opportunity to address each one of you on this meaningful sharing session. So this afternoon, we feel very lucky that together with us, Mr. Julian Bucher, a PhD student from the University of Potsdam, Germany. Hi, Mr. Julian. And by the way, he is a person who conducts a lot of studies on lesson studies, especially related to the management of lesson study. Actually, there are many issues and challenges faced by school leaders, teachers, pupils, and the community, of course. A less clear understanding may be among the factors that cause the lesson study not to develop, even though it's common to know the benefit of performing of lesson study. So, tuan-tuan hadirin hadirat yang dihormati sekalian, ladies and gentlemen, recognizing the importance of lesson study on improving the quality of teachers' teaching, we are called upon to hold this sharing session so that all parties involved, whether senior leader team, middle leader team, teachers, lesson study implementers, and the community will take this opportunity to listen to this sharing session with our invited speakers. So once again, congratulations to the PLC Lesson Study team of SK Sungai Buloh Selangau, who are very proactive in organizing the sharing of these best practices. And hopefully, the sharing like this will open more opportunities and space for us to learn about the lesson for the benefit of teachers and to the pupil, of course. Anyway, hopefully, through this sharing session, it will encourage lesson study in our district and, of course, in our respective school successfully. Yeah, finger crossed. I think that's all from me, Miss Stacy. Thank you very much.
Before I invite Mr. Julian, I would like to introduce a little bit about him. He's a very interesting person to know. Yeah, so he studied mathematics. Mr. Julian Bucher, he studied mathematics and computer science as an undergraduate student in the University of Heidelberg, Germany from 2015 to 2019. As a graduate student, he completed a Master of Education in the University of Heidelberg. He wanted actually to become a high school teacher for mathematics and computer science, and for his graduation thesis, he spent around 1 year in Kyoto University conducting research on Japanese lesson study. Now, since February 2022, he is a PhD student at the University of Potsdam and part of their lesson study project with 19 primary schools. So without further ado, please, the floor is yours, Mr. Julian.
Thank you so much, Tessie and Dr. Noel, for this kind introduction and the kind words. So I will just start and share my screen with you. No problem. I hope now you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Great. So let's start. As said, thank you so much for this kind introduction from Tessie and Dr. Owen. And as already teased today, I will talk about leadership management in lesson study. And I'm from the University of Potsdam, but not every building is that beautiful, which you can see on the screen right now. Actually, the Department of Education is a very normal building. So let's start. What will I do today with you? First, I would like to talk a little bit about the lesson study project in Germany from the University of Potsdam. And then I will focus on an interview study we conducted about leadership and the principal views on lesson study and general problems and conditions for success. So as Ms. Tessie already said, we are a lesson study project with 19 elementary schools all over Germany. So as you can see on the right-hand side on the map, Potsdam is the black dot right in the northeast, so near Berlin. And every other yellow small dot is one primary school where we conduct lesson study with school teachers. So you can see we are based all over Germany, and also all the schools are quite different, and you need different solutions if you want to try out lesson study there, but later more on this one. Normally for a school there are 3 to 6 teachers involved in a lesson study team. This depends on the size of the school and on how many teachers are interested in trying out lesson study at the school. And normally one lesson study cycle, so starting with research theme or research question, planning the lesson, conducting the lesson, and doing the observation and discussing the lesson takes 6 to 8 weeks. But this also depends on the school, so that's just an average. For example, we offer a school in north of Germany, which does not like to spend so long time on one cycle, so they do it in just 2 weeks. But we also have a school who say, hey, we really want to do school development with lesson study, and they take a lot of time doing research on the lesson planning and the Kyosai Kenkyu, and they spend around 3 or 4 months for one lesson study cycle. Actually, our lesson study project is in a bit of a special setting because the whole project is funded by the government, especially by the Ministry of Education. And this project is embedded into a larger project concerning gifted education and talent development. So when we are thinking about lesson study, we are also thinking about how we can support students, especially in the gifted education field. That's something special in our lesson study project in Potsdam, I think. And what do we want to get from our project? So first of all, we want to gain experiences with lesson study, because lesson study is also relatively new in Germany. The first experiences with lesson study was, I think, 10 or 15 years ago, and not so many schools. So with our 19 primary schools, this was by far the largest lesson study project Germany ever had. As part of our project, we also developed some products, or lesson study project, as I called one on the slide, where we wanted to help schools to get into lesson study and conduct lesson study at the school. For example, we have written a small booklet on lesson study and how to conduct every small step, because as you've seen on the map on the last slide, the schools are really all over Germany, so we cannot visit each school in person when they have questions or need our support. And last but not least, as I said, we are in the setting of gifted education and talent development, so we also want to support and guide gifted education in Germany with our lesson study project. So the last slide on the project, what is our research about, and where we have 3 main points we are thinking about. First of all, we want to know how do teachers learn through observation and reflection in lesson study. This is a very general question, but in Germany we have quite unique observation system, I think. You can see it on the right-hand side. During lesson study, it works like that every observing teacher chooses exactly one child, and this teacher gets post-it notes in one color. For example, you can see 3 colors on the right-hand side. So 3 children were observed during the observation. And when we write down what we observe and notice doing for a child on our post-its, plus the time step. And later on, during the discussion session, we will present a graph on how complex we think the learning activity of a child was for that time, and we call them the learning activity curves. I think that's a specialty in Germany, and some teachers do it in Austria, but it's primarily a German thing. But I will not focus on that today. We will focus on the second and third research question, because we are talking about leadership today. It's also what are prerequisites and framework conditions for successful lesson study. I think that's also something you're concerned about. And when you look at your school, what is the framework that lesson study can be successful? And of course, what is the role of a school principal, and how important is leadership in lesson study at all? So as I said, from now on, we will focus on the second and third research topics. I will present to you an interview study we conducted with summer this year and late spring, where we asked our schools about what they think about lesson study, how well it worked, what's their opinion about the last years. And we wanted to answer 3 research questions with this interview study. First of all, what are the benefits of lesson study from the interview's point of view? And we will separate between school principals and leadership and teachers. And the second question is, what obstacles did the schools encounter? And last but not least, what is considered essential for the success of lesson study? So a bit of a contrary to a second research question. For method, as I said, we used a semi-structured interview based on Drever. And of course, we prepared the interviews. And during the preparation of the interview, we also did one testing interview, one pilot study, where we also looked if it would be necessary to do interviews with 3 teachers for the same school, for example. But we found out that when the teachers are from the same schools, all the answers are quite similar. So we decided that we only want to interview 1 school teacher and the principal from each school. When we transcribed the interviews and anonymized them, coded the interviews in vivo, that meant that as codes, we only used words the teachers and the principal really said during the interviews, and then categorized and asserted the interviews. You can see here an example of codes, categories, and assertions. Of course, the interviews were conducted in German, so with the translation into English. So you can see on the left-hand side, the teacher said, for example, that they have no time to conduct lesson study and that it feels like additional work and that they have staffing issues. That's what the teacher said. When I looked at the category, or I decided that this would be good for a category framework, that I will use all this code works in my category framework. And then lastly, I come to an assertion. So what I think as a researcher about that, what I gain from that. And for example, from this example would be external conditions prevent primary schools in Germany from conducting lesson study more frequently. Because the question during the interview was, why do you not conduct lesson study more frequently in your elementary school? And what the teacher answered, got into code, I decided category, and then I came back to the assertion. That's how it works. So what's the setting? From our 19 primary schools all over Germany, we selected 4 primary schools. Actually, for the interview study, we selected 6 interview schools, but the last 2 schools, we did not have time to analyze right now. So I will only show you the data from the 4 primary schools. But I can say, because I conducted the interviews with our schools, that the answers are quite similar. So they support our findings, which I will show you right now. And I think what I did not mention so far, all these 19 elementary schools conduct lesson studies since 4 years. So they started in 2018 around. And of course, as you all know, during that time, the COVID pandemic happened. So this was also a bit of a difficulty. So perhaps 4 years sounds a lot, but minus COVID-19, perhaps it's around 2 years of experience with lesson study, I think. As I said, we selected with 4 primary schools or 6 primary schools from our 19 primary schools. And we selected them that we looked like we wanted schools who conducted a lot of lesson study cycles and not so many lesson study cycles. Because I think, as you imagine, lesson study does not work quite as well at every school. So we wanted to interview schools where we thought lesson study works quite well, but also schools where we think there could be a problem, or why did you only manage to complete 1 lesson study cycle in this whole time? And as I said, this our lesson study project is embedded in this last lesson study project, and the larger project about gifted education founded by the Ministry of Education. Now in the table on the right-hand side, you can see a bit more of an overview of the interviewees. So you can see that 6 of them were female. We will focus, as I said, on professions. So we interviewed 4 principals and 4 teachers. Or when you take whole 6 schools, so 6 principals and 6 teachers. The teaching average was about 22 years, and the size of the lesson study team average is about 4 members. As I said, the range is about 3 to 5 members in our lesson study project. Also, as I said, we selected the 6 primary schools as a contrasting sample on how many lesson study cycles they conducted, and we have a range from 0 lesson study cycles to 5 lesson study cycles. So we have schools who conducted 5 lesson study cycles, but we also have teachers or much more school principal who never participated in 1 lesson study cycle at their school. So we have a range from 0 to 5. So first of all, what do we already know from our research about leadership in lesson study? And we know that for a successful and sustainable implementation of lesson study, leadership is a very important factor. So that's nothing new. And we know, for example, that it's beneficial for a school and that lesson study can be sustained in the school more easily if the school principal has knowledge about lesson study. And when they are convinced that lesson study will work, and also support organizing lesson study and are available and provide support. So the school principal is a very critical figure in sustaining lesson study. It's kind of a motivator and someone who can decide and really support the team also on organizational matters. What I want to say in short is, even if a school principal do not participate actively in lesson study, they are key figures. So as a school leader and school principal, you don't need to participate in every lesson study of your team, but be engaged. So back to our interview study, our first research question was about leadership in lesson study. And as I said, the role of the school principal is quite important. And also, the role of the principal is perceived as critical from the principals themselves, where we are very happy about. And where I think that role is so critical, especially when it comes to organizational aspects, because the school principal is the decision-making authority. For example, when we want to conduct a research lesson, many teachers need to go to a classroom at the same time. And the school principal can decide, yeah, I allow you to do that. Of course, to support the lesson study team, and last but not least, 2 out of 4 of our school principals we interviewed also said it's very important for the motivational aspect and shows kind of appreciation for the teachers when we're engaged in lesson study. The school leaders and principals did not report any influence on the relationship between the principal and the teachers while conducting lesson studies. So we look at them at an equal part of the team, where we're also very happy about. And if they think that there's an advantage concerning lesson study, the biggest advantage, if applicable, is that we focus on the learning of the children during the lesson study, and of course, collaboration and collaboration of teachers during the lesson study process. The next research question was concerned with the obstacles of lesson study. And where I want to go back to the coding and categories, which I showed you earlier during the method sections. And on the left-hand side of the table, you can see every categories from the teachers, and on the right-hand side, every categories from the principals. When I ask them, what are obstacles concerning lesson studies in the school? And you can see in the first line of the table that we can find external conditions on both sides. So teachers and school leaders and principals both report that external conditions can be an obstacle concerning lesson study. And if you conduct lesson study in your school, I think you heard from time to time that lesson study takes so much time, and therefore it's difficult to conduct in the school on a regular basis. Also, that there are staffing issues and they need more points. And as I said, so external conditions can be a problem from the view of the teachers and from principal. And as you can see, when we look at the different points, we have different obstacles from teachers and from principal points of view. So the teachers say that teamwork can sometimes be a problem, and they have personal challenges. So the daily work as a teacher, which can be a problem from their view concerning lesson study. And for principals, it's that understanding of lesson study, because some principals do not participate actively in lesson study at their schools. It's a problem for them that they do not really know how they can support the team when they are not engaged that much. So perhaps it's not surprising when you look at it from a broader perspective. So teachers are more concerned with personal challenges, and the principal looks more like from an organizational aspect as a school. So lesson study cannot be a success if the principal do not understand lesson study, in particular, if they are not convinced of the benefit of lesson study in their school. But that's nothing surprised, but it surprised how they talked about it during the interviews. And I would like to share some quotes with you. So the first principal I talked to said that there's no point, and he wants to get something from lesson study and not just give. And I wasn't really sure what this principal meant when he was talking about it, because what does he has to give to conduct lessons, and what do he want to get? Because of course he gets something when he conducts lesson study. He gets professional development and where teachers collaborate and engage and talk about the lesson. But when I talked to a different school principal, it was clear what the first principal was saying to me and wanted to say. So he said, we were quickly brought back to reality and you have to do it by yourself at the school. There is no pre-made lesson or scheme. So we had to experience it for ourselves and the expectations. So I would say that it's very important as a school principal that you have enough knowledge about lesson study, that you can be convinced about lesson study. And if you don't want to engage in lesson study actively, that you trust the teachers of your lesson study team, that they say it works for us, it's a great method, we want to continue, that it's worth the time which lesson study definitely needs. Last but not least, we asked what is essential for the success of lesson study, and here you can see the frequency of different codes the teachers and school principal mentions. In the darker green, you see the principals, and in the lighter green, you see the teachers. We will only focus on the left-hand side of the diagram, because here you can see the main differences and also concerning leadership, which we're talking about right now. So interestingly, for teachers, the cooperational aspects are very important. And on the other side, for a school principal, it is much more important that the teachers participate from their voluntarily, and they do it from their own interest, that they don't force to do this. That was also mentioned by one teacher, but the main point, what was essential, is different. Also, external conditions are mentioned by both, and support from principals looked as essential, but that's only something the principal stated, not one of the teachers. So to summarize the results, when we look at principals and teachers, for first research question, we can say that I showed you that the focus on the learning on the children and teacher collaboration is something they really value from this study. Which I did not show you on the slides. Teachers answered quite similarly to this question during our interview. So it's also a focus on the learning of the children and teacher. When we look at the second question, this was the obstacles. As I said, external conditions was seen by both, but for principal it was more the understanding of lesson study, where they had a problem with. For teachers, it was more like the personal challenges. So from this point of view, I would advocate that principals engage in lesson study and try to understand lesson study quite well. So what we shifted, for example, is that when we go to school and we want to try out lesson study, we of course talk with the school principal and explain why it would be a good idea from our point of view to try out lesson study and what are the benefits for him. And last but not least, what is seen as essential for lesson study, it's an interest and voluntary on the side of the principals, but from the teacher side, it was more cooperation-wise. So this is what we get from our interview study, but perhaps this does not give you some practical answers and what to do now. So I try to give you some practical advice when you want to conduct lesson study at your school, or what you could do. Because as I said, we conducted lesson study with 19 elementary schools and every school is different. So I don't know if one of this advice works for you, but that's at least what we tried and what sometimes. So some recommendations about what you could try at your school. First of all, you could support the lesson study team concerning organizational aspects as a school leader. So because you really have the power and you have power and right to schedule appointments for lesson study, and that's something teachers really need support when we cannot organize themselves observation lessons for us. And when it comes to the observation lessons and the research lessons, this is the most critical part, I think, time-wise, because you need many teachers present in the same classroom. And from the point of view of the principal, this is often a problem. So what we shifted to is that we conduct research lesson in the first period of the day or in the last period of the day of the school. So, for example, when it's the last period of the school day, our classes can go home early or can go to the field ground and conduct lesson study and conduct some activities wherever we conduct lesson study in the school. Also, are available and provide support if needed for your lesson study team, school leader and principal. And last but not least, if you do not engage actively in lesson study with your team, which is okay, of course, then trust your lesson study team when we tell you this is great and you want to continue it, so that you give them the time needed for lesson study. So yeah, thank you so much. This is what I wanted to share with you today. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask right now.